This is my 160 litre or 40 US gallon community tank, and over the last couple of months I've been giving it a little bit of a rescape. For today's video, I'm going to walk you through the process that I used, which may be helpful if you're thinking of doing a partial rescape on one of your tanks but want to keep the livestock in there. This has been a very smooth process, to be honest, and it's gone a lot easier than I thought it would. The first step of this rescape was tackling the duckweed in the tank. Duckweed is probably one of the best plants in the hobby for naturally stabilising water parameters, but it can definitely become a nuisance quickly. Because I wanted to try some plants that have the potential to turn red in the rescape, I knew that light penetration into the water would be important, so the floating plants had to go. Someone left a comment on one of my recent videos saying that he didn't choose the duckweed life, the duckweed life chose him, and I totally agree. Both times duckweed has found its way into my fish room, it's hitchhiked in on plants that I ordered from eBay and I didn't notice until it was already spreading. In my experience, the quickest and easiest way to get rid of duckweed is with a hair comb, and you literally just scoop it off the surface of the water. This first big duckweed removal session took 5 to 10 minutes, but the thing to keep in mind is that the less duckweed you have left in your aquarium, the less you're going to scoop out with your hair comb, so it takes longer and longer. To finish the job, I angled my filter outlet towards the water's surface because duckweed doesn't seem to like having any water flow across its roots, so I hoped this would weaken it and stop it doubling. After that, I took around a minute a day over the next week to have a quick look at the surface of the tank and remove any straggling duckweed leaves. So moving on to removing the submerged plants in the tank, and this was about 2 weeks later because I was checking different plant suppliers here in the UK, and my idea was to remove all of the plants I didn't want and then get the new ones in all at once, but I could never find all of the new plants I wanted in stock at the same time. Instead of waiting, I decided to just go ahead and remove all of the Rotala rotundifolia, Ludwigia mini super red, and the Tiger Lotus that were in the tank. I was originally thinking of just removing all of the fish for this step, but then I remembered how difficult it was to catch a single tetra for quarantine when it was sick. With the tank having around 35 fish in it, I decided that it just wasn't realistic and decided to just get on with it. Removing the plants while the tank is full of water can be a little bit trickier, but I did specifically choose to do it this way with a full water volume to dilute anything that might be released into the water during the process. As you can see, visibility quickly drops off as the clouding kicks in from the soil and detritus and anything else that's being kicked up into the water column. Thankfully, the removal process only took around 5 minutes, and I was honestly shocked by how much plant mass was in there that needed to be removed. Once the plants were out of the tank, I hooked up my water change system and siphoned out as much of the dirty brown water as possible. This part did take around 20 minutes, but keep in mind this is a 160 litre or 40 US gallon tank, so there's quite a bit of water in here. I know that some people are nervous about doing large water changes like this one, but personally I've never had an issue in my tanks which are heavily planted. After draining the tank, I refilled it with temperature matched water, which means I basically tweaked the hot and cold taps to make sure the water coming out of those and through the siphon back into the tank was the same temperature the fish are used to. Even though this is clean tap water coming in, you can see the tank is still quite cloudy, so I decided to crank up my Fluval F2 canister filter to full flow. I usually run it around 80%, but the idea was that the mechanical filter media in the tank would trap as much of the particles as possible to get the water clear. As you can see, the water level is also lower than usual because understandably a lot of the fish in here are currently stressed, so I wanted to discourage jumping by having the water level as low as possible. This clip is around half an hour later and the tank is already looking a lot clearer thanks to the filter floss in the canister filter catching a lot of the debris. But a lot of the dirt was settling onto the plant leaves, and while I was a little worried at first, this really wasn't an issue because my small army of Neocaridina shrimp, Armano shrimp and Neurite snails quickly got rid of it passively without me needing to do anything. This clip is around 12 hours later and you can see the water is far clearer because of that filter media just trapping a lot of the particles and a lot of it naturally settling into the substrate. So I went ahead and fed the fish as usual and the tank was back to looking stable. Now there is a random sword plant floating amongst the Anubias. This isn't something I dislodged, it's left over from one of my other tanks and I wanted to keep it in here just in case I wanted to use it during the rescape. So moving on about a week, and some of the plants that I'd actually been waiting for this tank were back in stock, so I decided to place an order. At the same time, I also noticed that some of the Rotala rotundifolia was starting to regrow, so I removed that too. The new plants that I picked up are Echinodorus Bleheri, better known as Amazon Sword, Echinodorus Red Diamond, which I've wanted to try for quite a while but it's often out of stock, and Echinodorus Ozelot Red Flame, which I wanted to try one of the Ozelots, I wasn't really bothered which one. I planted this Ozelot and then realised that I hadn't hit record, so I quickly uprooted it and replanted it for the footage, but that's why you can see some extra particles floating around. I placed it in the left mid-ground of the tank to fill out this area, and this is a brand new plant for me, so I am curious how it will develop over time. After that, I placed the Amazon Sword in the back right of the tank to fill out that area with its leaves as it grows in, because these guys get absolutely huge. I did try and make sure that I would have enough space away from the Anubias and Java Fern islands in the tank so I can get in there for trimming if needed, but there should be plenty of space. In front of that, I placed the Echinodorus Red Diamond to help block the lower parts of the Echinodorus Bleheri behind it, while also adding some colour contrast because its leaves have 3 different colours. About a month later, I noticed that there was more plants listed as in stock, so I put an order in and I got my Echinodorus Tropica, which is a dwarf sword plant, but unfortunately the rest of the plants I did order ended up being out of stock. So instead, I went for a Lagenandra Meeboldii Red, which is a plant I have been wanting to try for months, but again, it's always sold out or at least sells out quickly, but finally I did manage to get this one. I use Echinodorus Tropica a lot in my tank, so I knew what to expect here, but I didn't expect the Lagenandra to have 4 different separate plants in the pot. So this did mean that I would have extras, so I used 2 of them in one of my other tanks. If you've seen some of my older videos, you might remember me mentioning that my Siamese Algae and Corydoras are always trying to squeeze into this little cave to steal the food that my shrimp drag in here. I'm always worried that they'll get stuck, so I decided that it was time to cover it with an Echinodorus Tropica, which once grown in should be perfect to cover this cave entrance. It's basically a miniature Amazon sword, which is very easy to keep in my experience. It maxes out at around 10 centimeters or 4 inches, and it's perfect for this area. Again, I planted this before realising that I hadn't pressed record, so I had to uproot it, and that's why there's some debris floating around. Moving on to the Lagenandra, and I planted one in the left mid-ground to fill out this area more, and I am hoping this will get the reddish brown hues that its leaves can, but these lights on this tank aren't really that high intensity, so I'm happy if it just stays green. And then I added the other one to the right hand side to hide a gap there that always catches my eye and really bothers me, and I know it's a petty little thing, but it's just one of those things. So at this stage of the rescape, this is what things were looking like in the tank, and I was really happy with it. I was thinking about getting an Echinodorus halberge to put behind the Echinodorus Aquartica to fill out that area, but again they're often sold out, so it would be a while before I could even see one. So moving on, and first off, don't worry, this Corydoras isn't dead, it's just found some food that the shrimp didn't quite pull into the little cave, and it's there enjoying it as it steals it from the shrimp. But over the 2 weeks since planting the Echinodorus Tropica here to block the cave and recording this clip, my Corydoras has completely ignored the Tropica plant and absolutely battered it, just trying to uproot it to get into the little cave. Thankfully, they didn't succeed and the plant did grow in after around a month, and it got big enough so it's just not worth their time trying to get in anymore, and now they don't even try and get in there, they just leave the shrimp to enjoy their meal. Moving on, and we get to the algae issues that the tank is having, because I removed a lot of duckweed and Rotala rotundifolia from this tank, which means the natural water purification of the tank has dropped off significantly, so algae has started to grow on the plant leaves. My first plan was to float some Hornwort in the back right corner of the tank to soak up the excess nutrients there without having to bring a lot of stem plants back into the scape. Hornwort is a very fast grower, but unlike duckweed, it's a free floating stem plant, meaning it doesn't go into the substrate, it just floats in the water, but because it's a stem plant you can just grab fistfuls of it and remove it with ease. It has definitely helped with the algae and it has dropped off, but with the level of stocking in this tank and how much I feed it, it just isn't enough. So I picked up some Limnophila Sessiliflora to back up the Hornwort, which is the fastest submerged grown plant I've ever kept in any of my tanks, and I used around half of the pot in my 40-gallon and half in one of my other tanks. I placed the Limnophila Sessiliflora behind my Echinodorus Aquartica because that space was starting to shrink due to the other plants grown in, and there's no way an Echinodorus halberd is going to fit in there anyway. Stem plants are perfect for this spot because they are flexible and can easily grow around leaves and stuff like that, so they'll get light, so it shouldn't be an issue grown here. This clip is from around 2 months ago now, and as you can see, the tank is really starting to look like I wanted it. The Anubias did still have quite a lot of green spot algae on its leaves, but the Echinodorus Tropica was sending out runners of little plantlets on it, so I decided to let it grow just to see what happened. While the algae issues in the tank are slowly improving, I do think it's coming down to the high stocking levels and high bioload of the tank relative to the plants in here. So I decided to move some of the water lettuce over from one of my other tanks to this one because this is another excellent plant for natural water purification. I added a few floating plant rings to the surface of my 40-gallon and placed the water lettuce in there to do its thing, and then I decided to increase my 150% water change for this tank per month into 2. So jumping forward to today, and this is what the tank is looking like right now. The new Echinodorus and Lagenandra plants have been in here for between 2 and 3 months depending on which batch they came from, and they're all starting to grow in really well. Overall, I'm really happy with how things are shaping up with the tank, and there's just something about Echinodorus plants that I really like. Unlike the old Rotala rotundifolia jungle with a lot of stems blocking off a lot of the swim space for my Corydoras and larger fish in here, these rosette plants that I've replaced them with still let them get in there and swim around, but they still add a visual aspect to the background too. The algae situation is slowly improving thankfully, but I am considering changing how I deal with the algae in here. I recently got into using houseplants on the back rim of my aquariums with their roots dipping in the water, and I do think that's something I want to try with this. As you can see in this clip, I've already done this with some of my other tanks, so it shouldn't be difficult to get some of the Tradescantia cuttings and move them over to here. And then I'll get some spider plant, maybe some pothos and monstera, and try and put its roots into this tank. One of the main advantages of using houseplants in this way over floating plants is that they don't cause issues with light penetration in the tank. That means that they should still be able to suck up a lot of the excess nutrients out of the tank which is causing the algae, but I should be able to get enough light into the tank to get the Echinodorus Red Flame, the Echinodorus Red Diamond and the Lagenandra Meeboldii Red to colour up as best as possible with these current lighting units. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for watching and good luck with your planted tanks.